up to the book of Hebrews. It's one of the books we do on Sunday, and this is where we are. We're going to start where we left off and move forward, and we're going to get to one of the hard scriptures of the Bible that many believers are tempted to avoid, but don't avoid the hard things because they lead to life. We're going to start with Hebrews 10 and verse 23. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stimulate each other or provoke each other to love and good works, and not forsaking our gathering together, as is the habit of some, but to encourage one another all the more as you see the day drawing near. For if we go on sinning willfully after receiving the knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins, but a terrifying expectation of judgment and the fury of a fire which consumes the adversaries. Anyone who has set aside the law of Moses dies without mercy on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. How much more severe do you think he will deserve who has trampled underfoot the Son of God and has regarded as unclean the blood of the covenant by which he was sanctified and has insulted the Spirit of grace? For we know him who said, vengeance is mine, I will repay. And again, the Lord will judge his people. It's a terrifying thing to fall into the hands of the living God. But remember the former days when, after being enlightened, you endured a great conflict of sufferings, partly by being made a public spectacle through reproaches and tribulations, and partly by becoming sharers with those who were so treated. You showed sympathy to the prisoners and accepted joyfully the seizure of your property, knowing that you have for yourselves a better possession and a lasting one. Therefore, do not throw away your confidence, which has a great reward. For you have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what was promised. Now, we're going to talk about very important things this morning, and what has to do with your salvation and pressing on to what God has and not falling away. And we begin with the issue here, and this is what makes it such a hard thing for many believers. There are 2 extremes along these lines. One extreme in the Lord is that no matter what I do, it doesn't affect anything. No matter how I live, if I live in fornication, I'm living together with somebody, I'm living in witchcraft, whatever, I'm still saved because once I received God, the Lord, or I prayed to receive the Lord. Then there's the other extreme, that is that you're worried right now if you're still saved. You're worried because you messed up, you thought something you shouldn't have thought, and you just don't feel God's love, and you're worried, and you're continually worried about your salvation. That both are extremes, and they both are not biblical. The Bible never says you can live in a manner where those who live in this way, the Bible says, will not enter the kingdom of heaven, and you can do it, and it's fine because you said a prayer. At the same time, the other extreme is that if I mess up, if I sin, if I fall, I'm not saved anymore. That's not true either. The Bible says if we say we are without sin, we are lying. But the blood of Messiah, Jesus, cleanses us from all sin. Most of the great people of God fell. I mean, in dramatic ways, some of them. But the blood of Messiah cleanses us. But this is speaking here of people who are rejecting the faith, who are walking away totally from the life of God. It clearly is speaking of those. It's speaking to the you. The Hebrews is doing this again and again and again, talking to people who need encouragement to keep going and not to turn away and not to fall away. And to keep going to the Lord, it says, listen, you did this, so don't throw away this confidence. That's clearly believers, those who have been saved by the Lord. But it's speaking here, the warning is against those who walked away. And back then, if you walked away from the Lord, you didn't really have a Christian culture or a nominal Christian culture to kind of fade into. It was either acceptance or rejection back then, especially for Jewish believers. So he's saying if you reject the Lord, there is no security. And if you want security that you can completely reject God and his ways and still be saved, it's not in the Bible. I don't care how you rationalize it or how people rationalize it. Well, they were never saved. The fact is, this is what it's warning against. It was counted the blood of the covenant as common by which he was saved, or something worthless. This goes along. This is clearly here. Here it's speaking of. It says the blood. These are people, it says the blood sanctified you, and yet don't walk away from it. Don't disregard it. Now this goes against strict doctrinaire Calvinism, which would say, well, then they weren't saved, or that if they were, they can never walk away, or that strict Calvinist belief that Messiah did not die for everyone. He only died for some. It's limited. His atonement is limited according to that belief. And so therefore, you can't technically, if you weren't one of the few who he died for, because it's a remnant, it's the elect, then you have no way of accepting anyway. I spoke to somebody who espoused this, and I said, well, then what's the good news? What's the gospel? That God so loved just a few, that he gave his only begotten son for just a few, that whosoever, but not whosoever, just a few can receive him. I said, then what are you preaching? What's your message? Where's the gospel in that? That Jesus died to save sinners, but I can't say if he died to save you. I'm witnessing the person. I can't say he died. He might have died for you, but he may not have, and probably didn't because it's a few. What kind of good news is that? That you might or might not be going to hell. There's no good news in that. That's not the good, cannot be good news. The person answered, well, if they accept it, then they're the ones he died for. Well, I said, accept what? You just preached to them that he might have died for you. There's nothing to accept there. There's nothing. Where's God's love in that? How can you accept he might have died, he might not have? There's nothing to accept. There's no good news to accept. And he said, well, it comes true if they accept it. It can't come true. What we do is not going to change God. That's New Age. So it's just not so. The Bible speaks in ways that man cannot put in his boxes. And when man tries to put it in his boxes, gets into trouble. And so avoid the extremes here. Avoid that. The Bible speaks both of the comfort and the security that we have, that we can rest in God's love. And if we trust in that, it's keeping us. At the same time, it never says that no matter what I do, because I said a prayer, that doesn't matter in the scheme of salvation. It warns against falling away. And so there is a balance. And what it's saying here also, and it says in the book of Hebrews, that it's worse to have known all these things, knowing God, and then walk away from him, because they're more accountable, because it's a greater rejection, it's a greater step of evil. And that's true for individuals, and it's also true, you could take this application, amazingly, apply it to an entire nation or civilization. The difference between a civilization that is